Once you're done with all of your color runs and you have your finished prints, you can alter your print with a variety of materials. You can also use these materials to fix or hide any imperfections in your print. You can see here that as my screen became worn, there are big ink splotches that happened and you can't quite read the text in one of my final prints. So I'm going to use some different materials to not only add interest to my print, but also to cover up some of those imperfections and make it something I'm really happy with. In this video, I'm going to show watercolor, acrylic paint, ink, and color pencil, but you can also, if you're using black ink, use an India ink pen to fix any imperfections. I can use color pencil to add interest and different varieties of color into my print. I'm going to use Prismacolor in this video because I find that Prismacolor is a lot easier to mix. So first I'm going to pick out a color, and I thought I wanted blue, but this blue doesn't quite match the blue I want, so I actually think I'm going to go for yellow. Before I do that, I'm going to test out my yellows again to make sure that they will work well with the colors that I already have. If I ever need to sharpen these Prismacolor pencils, I need to use a hand sharpener so that I can have them for a long time. When I use Prismacolor pencils, I'm going to tip them a little bit to the side, and I'm going to go in really small areas and press really lightly. I don't want to leave a lot of lines in there, so I'm just really gently shading all of the areas where I want this yellow to appear. I can also go into small circles, and that will help get a really smooth shading in this flower. White color pencils can also be used as a blender. So if you ever need to blend colors together, you can use a white color pencil or a colorless blender. I'm using layers at a time and going in and making them darker. Instead of using tons of pressure, I'm just layering the pencil over itself. I want to balance out my composition, so I'm going to incorporate this color into another area of my composition so that they balance each other out. I can do this in multiple spots with multiple colors, but I just wanted to show you an example. You'll notice I'm going back and forth between my light yellow and my dark yellow, and every time I layer them over each other, they actually mix together on top of the paper. And then I can use my green here to add just a little bit of a transition point between my green ink and my yellow color pencil. Next, I'm going to show how to use acrylic paint. In the classroom, we have a whole cabinet that's labeled Painting 1 that has all of the acrylic paint in here. For this demo, I'm going to use gold because I'm really interested in that metallic area, and I'm going to focus my efforts on these areas where there was too much ink. So if you ever need to cover up an area and add more detail to it, you can use acrylic paint to cover up ink that you've already put onto your composition. So I'm just dipping an acrylic paint brush. It has a blue handle and a yellow top, and I'm dipping that into the acrylic paint that I put on tin foil, and I'm painting it into the areas where I do want to do a little bit of covering up. If I need to blend it out into my paper, I can use something called stippling, which is where I pick my brush up and dot it back down, and that will sort of blend my paint colors into the paper so that they fade out instead of being a really harsh line. I can also use a teeny tiny bit of water on my brush to blend it out as I stipple. This technique works really well if you had big ink splotches that you don't really want to be in your final print. Because you can't really read the letters in my print from the screen print, I'm going to go back over them with a really fine brush and the gold ink just to re-emphasize what I wrote so that everyone can read it. And then the green sort of acts like a background, and the gold really stands out as the letter itself. Once my print is dry, I also have the option to go back in with my ink that I used for screen printing, and I can go back in and I can add details on top of my acrylic paint, or I can add details that just didn't show up in the original print. So in this case, I'm going in with that green paint and I'm adding in some more of the flower details that were in the original image that just got lost in the big amount of ink that came through the screen when I was printing. In this part of the image, I am going through any of my blotchy lines that I wish were a little more smooth in my print, and I'm just using a little bit of ink to either put those details that were lost back in or to solidify any of the lines that I'm not happy with. Watercolor is a great way to enhance your image and make it more interesting. I will start by adding a little bit of water to one of my wells and then adding color slowly to it. The key to watercolor is it needs to be transparent every time. So for the color I'm mixing, I'm trying to match the blue of the caterpillar and the butterflies as the accent in my print. So I'm going to test it out on paper because watercolor does look different in the well than it does on paper. If I need to add more color because it's too transparent, I will do that. And I'm going to actually add a little bit of red in this case to tone down the blue. So since blue and yellow make green and the opposite of green is red, I'm going to add red to tone down my color. The watercolor brushes have a black or navy blue handle and a fluffy brush head. I can paint the watercolor directly onto my image. Anytime I want it to be a lighter gradient, I'm going to actually add water to it and blend it out. So in this case, I want it to be a little bit lighter as it goes away from the green lines. So I'm going to clean my brush and add a little bit of water to lighten it. A clean, damp brush is going to be your best tool for blending and adding gradients. I want to be careful not to soak the paper or add too much water. While it's still wet, if I want to add a different color and blend it in, I can totally do that. So in this case, I'm going to add just a little bit of yellow to make it more interesting.